Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about doing skull crushers for your bench press gains. Not just for your triceps, but for your actual bench press. And this is one of these things that over the years I've been resistant to. I tend to oftentimes historically be resistant to too many smaller exercises. But at the end of the day, even I have to admit that the bench press for a non-novice lifter isn't always the best stimulator of tricep growth. And triceps can be a limiting factor in your bench press. So it's kind of ironic that a muscle that only gets really secondary stimulation, and I mean, you can look at EMG data and tell the triceps, they get worked on a bench press, but not as effectively as we would like. However, that really is just for the non-novice lifter. And the reason I say that is that novice lifters grow from everything. And multiple studies over the years have confirmed that someone in their first 6 months of training adding any sort of tricep work doesn't grow any faster in their arms. Their triceps don't grow any faster versus if they just do enough bench pressing to make their chest grow quickly. However, when we get to more advanced lifters, that's no longer the case. And when we start looking at the different data out there, EMG, biomechanics, everything else, it becomes obvious that the triceps do not get maximum activation in terms of total workload from the bench press. They just don't. So it's like I tell people, if you want to count bench volume, count it as half sets, right? And a lot of coaches are doing that. Count it as half sets. So if you do 10 sets of flat bench in a week, you did 5 sets for your triceps. Well, that may not be enough volume to make your triceps grow. Now, in theory, we could just do more bench volume, right? I mean, if you did 20 sets of flat bench, your triceps probably would grow from that. Here's the problem. Your chest probably isn't going to be able to handle that. And that's the reason we sometimes have to start looking at doing some of these smaller exercises for things like triceps, if a bench is, say, your primary press. Because the triceps get, a bit less work per set than the chest does. So you reach a threshold to where your chest might be growing maximally. Your triceps are not getting enough stimulation to continue to grow. They might grow up to a certain point, but you're no longer reaching, the minimum training volume you need for them to grow. So we come over to needing sometimes some smaller exercises. And I mean, you could do weighted dips, you could do other stuff, but it's still sometimes a balancing act between what your chest can recover from versus your triceps. So this falls into the category of an exercise that you really might need, particularly if you're someone like me where your chest grows easier. And I was always, again, resistant to admit this, but it does seem to be true. And I have to just accept that and go with what the current information is and follow it myself. So a couple things you guys are going to notice as I'm doing these, because people ask, do you get elbow pain from this? No, I don't. One of the things that I always tell guys, if you do these to your face or you do them to your neck or your chin, it can actually be an effective stimulus. I'm not saying it can't be. However, it oftentimes causes large amounts of inflammation in the tendons of your triceps down near the elbow. It makes your elbows hurt. And a lot of times guys do a lot of extensions and things like that, and then they blame the bench press for their elbows hurting or locking out on a big exercise, when that's actually not what's causing it. That's where they feel it. But they caused it by doing the smaller exercise in that way. So one of the things you guys are going to notice is that I bring it behind my head. And the reason for that, it puts a slightly different stress on the tendons. That few inches of difference puts a different stress on the tendons. Furthermore, it's a longer range of motion for the tricep. Because we are having some subtle amount of shoulder extensions happening there, we're engaging the long head a little bit more. We're getting a little more of a stretch reflex out of the bottom. And I don't believe that it's necessary for people to go all the way down. Like a lot of people will go really far down and overextend the shoulder. I don't think that's necessary unless you are trying to really, really focus hard on the long head. But you're going to get sufficient long head stimulation here, right? When you're doing it like this way, you are bringing that long head in. And so it is getting worked. It is getting worked. It's just not being the focus. So doing it in this variation is going to put a fairly equal focus on all three heads. Whereas if you go a lot further back, way down below the bench, you're probably going to be a more long head dominant. But we don't need that for the bench press. A lot of what we're trying to get is the medial head. which is the one on the inside of the elbow there. If you, like you look down inside of your elbow, the part of it that faces the body, that head right there, right by your rib cage usually, on the inside of the arm, that's what helps the bench press the most. And so by keeping in this position, we're making sure that we're working that. One of the other things you guys will notice, I'm using an easy curl bar. And this has to do with, again, just the proper pronation of the hands. And here's what I'm going to say on that. For years, I used to try to say, well, we need some specificity of training. Let's just use an Olympic bar. But you know what? The Olympic bar just doesn't seem to hit the triceps quite the same. That ability to just have that slight pronation of the wrists seems to contract the triceps a lot harder. It just does. And there's a certain point to where even I will say, well, we don't need to have our bench press grip width and the exact bar we're going to use on the bench because we're trying to build our triceps. We want our triceps to be bigger and stronger, right? That's what we want. And it's just not necessary to do that. So that's one of those cases of where I've looked at something historically and said, well, maybe we'd get better training specificity. And I think it's getting ridiculous. And I think even I was ridiculous for pushing that for a long time. So I've evolved myself in regards to my thoughts on some of these exercises over many, many years, and just realized, you know what, maybe I was just wrong. This seems to just work better. It seems to get a much better contraction of the tricep. Again, the movement pattern feels easier. It feels more natural. And that's what we're shooting for. One of the other things you'll notice is that I explode up, right? Notice there's no slowness. Everything is about speed. And I don't go over 10 reps anymore. In fact, I would even argue, and I may even myself start dropping down to 6s and 8s on these. Because at the end of the day, why are we doing a skull crusher like this for our bench? Are we doing it just to get pump work in? No. Pump work honestly doesn't work that well. And I remain unconvinced that pump work hypertrophy is even useful or viable in the long term. And I don't even know that when we get into these debates about the different hypertrophy types, it may or may not hypothetically exist. I don't know that you get more hypertrophy just because you get more sarcoplasmic growth or anything else. I don't know that that's really the case. I think you're going to get equal hypertrophy total based upon the amount of growth stimulus you have, the quality of sets, the quality of overload. So you're just more likely to get more strength if you keep the reps moderate and you focus on tension. Because at the end of the day, mechanical tension is what carries over to strength best. We're doing this to get more training volume in, right? Because you can only handle so much benching volume, and then your chest is at its limits and your triceps still might need more volume. And that's why we do an exercise like this. But it doesn't mean we can't do moderately heavy weight to very heavy weight for the target muscles we're doing to get that mechanical tension high, so that we can maximize myofibrillar growth, which is going to carry over to our bench press more, while still making your triceps bigger and thicker. And the other thing you'll note is that, notice it again, that I snap up. It's not slow. It's a fairly fast motion. I do a fairly quick eccentric. It's controlled, but enough to just get a stretch reflex, and then I use that stretch reflex to snap it up, right? It's controlled. It's not outside of my control. But it is a controlled explosive lift. And again, I'm using a stretch reflex. People would say, why? Because we want to develop power. We're trying to develop strength and power on this. And not only do we recruit more muscle fibers by doing that, which we do, we're getting the best possible carryover to help you be more explosive on a bench press, which is why we're doing this to begin with. We're doing this because we want bigger, stronger, more powerful triceps to help us lock that bench. And this will do it. And it's even Mark Ripito had called this before, doing them in this manner, behind and then a snap up. He called this the fourth power lift. Maybe he was right. He called it that many years ago, even though he doesn't really prescribe smaller exercises for his general clients and his novice program. He even called this the fourth power lift. There's probably some truth to that. Because when you think about how much triceps get used in a lot of these big exercises we do, whether it's the bench press, a push press, all the stuff you need for different sports even, they play a big role. And if you can find a variation like this that lets you add strength and power and thickness to your triceps, that's going to carry over to powerlifting, right? You carry over to being able to do a push press, carry over to football, boxing, everything else. So I hope this has been informative. And I will talk to you guys next time.